Hi, you made it. I'm stoked you're here. I've packed this teaching with 20 years of learning, experience, and I hope some wisdom. If you're here, then it's likely you are a Christian with a book idea living in your heart. And if so, you're somewhere between a raw idea all the way to a finished manuscript, or somewhere in between. Wherever you're at, I'm glad you found me, and I hope to make this worth your time. Let me tell you where we're going in this teaching. First, I will tell you who I am, how I initially failed at writing a book, and then how I eventually learned how to do it, and I believe how to do it well. Next, I want to surprise you by telling you what you don't need to write a book, and then what you do need to write a great book. In the meat of this teaching, I'll share with you my top 10 tips to writing a great Christian book. Whether that's a story of some life experience you've had, whether it's an applicational study on the book of Romans, a book about starting a business, or simply just a book about gardening. All books can be written from a distinctly Christian worldview and can be used by God. Finally, I want to share with you what my program is and how it works. It's called Newbie Book Writer. So first, who am I? My name is Joel Hughes, and I'm a Christian author. I've walked with the Lord for over 20 years now, and I love books. At one time, I had a personal library of about 2,000 books. I have degrees in graphic design, Christian ministry, and philosophy. I was a teaching pastor at 2 churches in Southern California. I've done missions overseas. I spent several years doing open-air street preaching and evangelism. I've spoken at Christian conferences, and I've even done a few large-scale formal debates with those who oppose the faith. I've taught adult-level courses in hermeneutics, Koine Greek, evangelism, and presuppositional apologetics, or basically worldviews. My passions, as you can guess, are theology, apologetics, evangelism, philosophy, history, and Christian living. And over those 20 years of ministry, I was always writing in one way or another. From my early days as a Christian, a newbie, I always dreamed of becoming a published Christian author. Now, this was in my early 20s. I actually did write 2 complete manuscripts, and I spent a solid year writing one of those books, but nothing ever happened with them. And the farthest I got with them was to print them out when I was done, feel some pride over my accomplishment, but ultimately they ended up in a shoebox under my bed. About, I'd say 10 years later, while I was moving, I found that old box under the bed. It was covered in dust. And so the question is why? What happened to those manuscripts? So as I think about it, I see 2 main reasons why those manuscripts ended up in a dusty grave under my bed. The first was fear, or a lack of courage in myself. And if you're a writer, you know what I'm talking about. It's all those voices in your head and my head that told me I'm not good enough. I'm a nobody. My writing is not that good. No one's going to take me seriously. You're too young. You don't have the right degrees, etc. All, on and on and on. And because of this fear, I never showed those manuscripts to anyone. The second reason I never did anything with those manuscripts was a lack of knowledge. You see, I had no idea what to do with those manuscripts. I didn't know any other book writers. I didn't know any editors, designers. And since I had a background in graphic design, I figured I'd DIY my own cover. And the covers that I made at the time, they seemed cool, but as I look at them now and they're embarrassing. So I knew nothing about any of it, traditional publishing versus self-publishing, and I could go on and on. But the only thing that I knew how to do was write. I had good ideas, I had a passion, and I could write, but that's it. And as I later learned, it takes a lot more than a good idea and a knack for writing to make a good book. I'll share more about those things later on in this video. But then, now if you may have seen my other video. At the time, this was when I was in my prime, my marriage fell apart and my then wife wanted out and she filed for a divorce. I was a broken and lost man for several years. I struggled with fear and depression and alcohol and feeling like a total loser. I lost everything. In my youth, I had always prayed, God, use me, use me, use me. But what I didn't realize then at that time was that God was preparing me through the brokenness. To paraphrase A.W. Tozer, he said, before God uses a man or a woman, he will first need to break that man. And I still remember while I was in my prime, a wise old pastor once pulled me aside after hearing me preach. And with his arm around me in his old way, he whispered in my ear, "You did well, but your knowledge is way beyond your sanctification. Be careful, my boy." Of course, I agreed with him, but I basically blew him off, and so God had to take me to school. Well, after some years of getting involved again with church and support groups and a couple therapists, the pieces of life came back together again, and that's when I met my new wife, Rebecca. I call her the good wife. 7 months into this new marriage, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer. A month later, Rebecca, at the age of 26, was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. You can imagine our world just turned upside down and everything went black. And that's when the urge to write came back. You see, I hadn't written anything for years up until that point. I didn't lose my faith, but I gave up all that academic and ministry type stuff. But in this new chapter of life, writing was one way I could fight back. And so I wrote my first little book titled Help, Someone I Love Has Cancer, How You Can Really Make a Difference. It's not a big book, but I was stinking proud of it. It's a good feeling. But it took me 2 years from the idea to its actual publication. And I think it only took 4 or 5 months to write the manuscript, but there was so much I had to learn to get that rough manuscript into a professionally published book. Just to clarify, this is all self-publishing. Now, my little book did later get picked up by a traditional publisher, but I still prefer self-publishing for all of my books. And the quality and look of my books will stand up next to any other book in pretty much any bookstore. But that one little book changed our lives in many ways. It spawned the idea to start our company, Rebecca's Hope. It's opened doors to speak at events and be featured on blogs and in magazines. I've since published 5 more books and more on the way. And I keep learning more and more about how to write and publish high quality books. Okay, so enough about me. Let's talk books and about you and why you're here. You've either written a manuscript, you've started one, or you have an idea for one. Or maybe all you have at this point is a desire to write a book, but you're not even sure exactly how that will look. And that's okay. If you were to take my course, I would help you find your topic and show you how to formulate it and take that initial idea and turn it all the way and go to a beautifully published book. So let's shift gears here. And what you don't need to be a good writer, to write a book. So before we get to my top 10 tips, for Christian writers, I want to encourage you first by telling you what you don't need to write a great book. And I know this because I can show you top-selling books that contradict all these common assumptions. So here they are. You don't need to be a great writer. You don't need great grammar and style. You don't need lots of free time. You don't need to be a Bible master. And you don't need to be known or famous. Now, of course, those things help, but they're not necessary. So what do you need to write a book? At the most basic level, you need 2 things. Number 1, you need a topic to write about. And number 2, consistency. But while that is enough to write a book, I didn't say it's enough to write a good book. In addition to a topic and consistency, to write a great book, you need a few more things. You need heart. You need passion. In fact, that's my number 1 top tip, so I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But you need heart and passion. You want to have a message that you believe in, something to say. You need a desire to help people. You need a proven guide who's been there, done that, and can show you a clear path to success. And finally, ultimately, you're going to need a team to help you see what you can't see and help you bring it all to completion. Got it? Good. Okay. So let's jump into my top 10 tips for writing a great Christian book. So as I just alluded to, number 1 is heart. I think the most important thing you need to write a great book is heart or passion for your subject and for the people that you're trying to reach. I mean, I guess there's some exceptions like a textbook or if you're writing a guidebook for something. But most any other book, if you're not captured by your topic, or at least captured by the idea of writing and publishing a book, you probably won't make it to the finish line, let alone write a book that people are going to enjoy reading, right? There's a concept that book writers speak of called the marathon in the middle. It's that point where you've been writing for a few months, page after page, and somewhere in the middle, you start to question yourself. What am I doing? What was I thinking? This is a pipe dream. I'm just wasting my time. And that's the place where most manuscripts go and die. So to avoid this burnout in the middle, you'll want to have three qualities that go with this idea of heart and passion. Okay, your topic. Number one, you want to write about something you care about, something that grips you. I like to say you're captured by your topic. It's something that's really important to you. The second thing is your take on the topic. Ideally, you want to have a take on your topic that you care about. And so what it means is you take a stand on something or for something. And it can be a strong stance on a controversial issue, but it doesn't have to be. It simply means that you believe in what you're writing about and you're willing to stick out your neck a little bit for it. And the third quality you need to fight through that marathon in the middle is your goal. And by this, I mean your driving goal in writing a book is, or it should be, to help people in some way. The good thing is it's not really difficult for us Christians. It's kind of built into the fabric of our faith. But if you're really convinced that what you have to say is something other people need to hear and that can really help them, then you're setting yourself up to write a really strong book. Okay, so number one tip is to have heart and passion for what you're doing. Tip number two is to know your audience. Ideally, you are that audience, okay? You're in it. But to drill down a little more, you want to know your particular genre. You also want to, drill down more and know your subgenre audience. So are you a woman writing for other women? Great. Are these both Christian and non-Christian women or just Christian women? Christian women? Okay. Is it for all Christian women? You say no. Well, let's say you want to write a book about postpartum depression for Christian women. Have you been through that? And do you have some unique insights or a unique take on that topic? See, now we're getting somewhere, and I'm feeling potential book titles in that unique insight or that take. And that's very specific, right? That's good. You want to try to niche down, and they say that the riches are in the niches. So tip number two is to really understand who your audience is, who you're talking to, because that leads to our next tip. Tip number three is to find your voice. We all have authors and we have teachers that we love. It's okay to learn from them, to even emulate them, but don't try to be them. Seriously, people will sniff you out and reviewers will say so. If you're not a funny person, don't try to be super funny. If you're not academically minded, don't try to sound smarter than you are. And here's a big one for Christians. If you're not a super spiritual person intimately in tune with God, don't write in a manner that communicates you are that person. I'm not that person, so I don't write that way. The power is in you just being you. And finding your writing voice is not that difficult. It's just, like I said, you being you. Just pretend you're sitting with a good friend having coffee and you're telling them something you're really excited about. That's your writing voice. For most nonfiction books, it's just one friend talking to another friend and just throw in a little touch of enthusiasm. Tip number 4 is similar to the last one, but I have a special word for Christians here. Tip 4 is to be real, okay? I'm speaking to the family here. Now, think about this. When we go to church on Sunday or wherever you go, whenever you go, what's one thing most of us do? When you look at many, if not most churches on Sunday morning, what's one common picture you see? People dressed up. Everyone puts on the extra effort or, time to do their makeup and their hair. Guys, they'll put on a button-up shirt. It's all the beautiful people. This is church after all, right? This is a place full of, where there's no unwashed sinners like the world. Now, why do most of us do this? The spiritual answer is that we do it out of respect for God in the house of God. That may be true for some, but for most of us, I just say no. We do it because we're afraid. We're afraid of the judgment from other Christians. We're afraid of looking like we don't have it all together. One author said that we all come to Christ because we recognize we're sinners, but then we spend the rest of our time pretending like we're not. So do you see what I'm saying here? Unfortunately, there's a lot of fakeness at church. Right now, in our culture, there's a lot of talk about millennials, right? Good or bad, whatever. That's not my point. One of the defining qualities of the millennial is their drive for authenticity, genuineness. And that drive and that desire has changed the fabric of our culture. There is less tolerance for fakeness, for people who pretend like they've got it all together, for the used car salesman all polished up, or for the know-it-all who just preaches at people. I think in many ways it's kind of a positive move forward in that sense. The point here is to be real, be you. Vulnerability is one of the most powerful tools you can use because it communicates you're a real person living in the real world, struggling with real crap just like your reader is. So if you come off like a know-it-all, most people will just tune you out. Now, of course, there are some exceptions. We don't want to be too vulnerable and air out all of our dirty laundry. We see now through a glass dimly for a reason. Sharing too much private information rushes people into a deep relationship that normally takes years to build. Or the other turnoff is that you come off, whiny, like a whiny victim looking for sympathy. We don't want to do either of those. The other exception is that some books simply don't need or call for much personal information or vulnerability, like, for example, a Bible study book or a book on business. But even with a business type book, most people would read that book because they want to learn how to get where you are at. Tell them where you started, fired from your job, broke and on food stamps. The reader will connect with you on an emotional level and then say to themselves, you know what, if they can do it, I can do it too. So tip number 4 is to be real. You are a sinner saved by grace. You're still a sinner, so don't try to sanitize yourself and give the impression as though you've arrived. Your authority comes from your honesty, your knowledge of the subject, and the fact that you found a solution or learned how to grow through whatever it was God was taking you. Okay, get it? Got it, good. All right, tip number 5 is about having a sound theology. Now, I know for many of you, don't let that overwhelm you. Sound theology is just correct or right theology. Basically, avoid heresy, okay? So let's drill down a bit more on this. You don't need to be a Bible master or know Greek to write an amazing Christian book, but you want to be consciously aware of your own worldview. On the big picture, you want to make sure you're not mixing elements from different worldviews. This is called syncretism. For example, mixing Christianity with conceptual ideas from Eastern mysticism or secular humanism. You don't want to do that. Let me give you some examples. For example, saying that the Bible is the Word of God, but then you elevate personal experience to a place of ultimate autonomy or authority that allows you to interpret the Bible however you feel. A simple and helpful paradigm to understand the Bible and the Christian worldview is to think of everything in terms of creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. So using that grid, let's see some common errors or heresies. Creation. It's common to hear that history always works in cycles and repeats itself. No, that's not what the Bible teaches, except maybe the book of Judges. The Bible, It happens in Judges. The Bible teaches creation ex nihilo, out of nothing, and is progressing towards a final end. Cyclical views of history are all pagan, okay? The fall. It's common in our culture to hear that we're all born with good hearts. We just make mistakes sometimes. No, that's humanism. The Bible teaches we are sinners at birth and we have corrupt hearts. How about redemption? It's common for people to say salvation is attained when we finally realize our true self, or that God has many ways to him and Jesus is just one of those ways. The Bible does not teach that. I trust that you know that. So here's a trickier one. I want you to see if you can spot the problem in this prayer. Imagine you're reading this prayer in a book. Dear Father, thank you for everything you do for us. Thank you for today and for life today. Thank you for your grace and provision and guidance. Thank you for making all things work together for good. Thank you for dying on the cross for us and making salvation possible. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, did you see any problems? Anything stand out to you there? It's one thing to say that in a private prayer, but it's another thing to etch it in stone when you go to print. The problem is that prayer thanks the Father for dying on the cross. I've heard people pray this before, and it's always just a slip in thought. But this is a heresy known as patripassionism. I know. You're like, I thought you said we don't have to be theologians or Bible masters. You don't. My point is just be aware of how important theology is. Be aware of your own theology. Now, this is where good Christian beta readers and editors come in to help us, and that leads to our next tip. Tip number 6. To write a good Christian book, you want to have a good Christian beta readers on your team. A beta reader is someone who reads your manuscript before it goes to print, and even before usually it goes to the editor. They offer helpful suggestions, feedback, and even criticism. Ideally, you don't want your beta readers to be people in your inner circles like your mom or your best friend. You want people who will be, as objective and honest as possible. Remember what the Bible teaches. For example, in 1 Corinthians 2:14, it says that the person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God. They don't accept it, but considers them foolishness, and they cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit, or they're spiritually understood. So this, of course, it's not to say that unbelievers are dumb. It's far from that. But they do not possess the spiritual eyes to see God's word as truth. And so when looking for beta readers, especially if your book is directly Christian, there's no comparison to finding someone who knows God and knows the Bible well. The same is true of the person, or some cases, the people who will edit your manuscript. You can find tons of people, editors, to hire on websites like Fiverr, but to find a solid Christian editor, it's like gold. It's even more critical than your beta readers because your editor will be far more invested in your work than a beta reader will. And your editor will be your best friend through the publishing process. And you want someone who not only understands you, but also shares the faith, the same faith that you share. Tip number 7 is to outline towards a solution. Okay, 2 points here. First, do an outline. Okay, for most nonfiction books, you will help yourself and your reader, most importantly, your reader, if you take the time to till the soil before you start planting. Imagine if you hired builders to build you a house and they didn't use the plans and the blueprints you had made. They'd say, oh, we're just going to wing it, right? Or imagine you're lost deep in a forest and 2 people emerge, they come out of your group as the guides, promising to lead you out to safety. One person says he will follow his instincts, while the other person has a map, a compass, and experience. Who would you follow? Your outline doesn't need to be crazy detailed, but you should know where you're going and where you're going to end up before you start writing. So this entire presentation you're watching here is outlined. And if the thought of outlining an entire book freaks you out, not to worry, there's different methods, and I cover all those in my course if you were to take my course. But my tip here is not just to outline, but as Christians, we want to outline towards a solution. Christianity is about redemption. Remember, creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. So as a Christian, you want to write with the goal of redemption and restoration. This doesn't always mean getting saved. It could, it could be how you found sobriety, or as simple as how you finally learned to grow your vegetables without weeds and bugs. Salvation in biblical terms is far more than justification and getting a ticket to heaven. It's about a reversal of the fall in all areas of life. Remember, the gospel only makes sense if there is bad news first. So problem, then solution. So tip number 7 is to outline toward a solution or with a redemptive goal. Tip number 8 is not so much Christian, but I do think it will encourage you in writing your first book. It's to aim small but powerful. Your first book doesn't need to be 300 pages and 17 chapters. As most of us know, reader attention spans are way down, and smaller paperbacks and ebooks sell like crazy online right now. Some of the best books I've ever read, and those that have transformed my life and my thinking, were little books, some even 100 pages. My advice, if you feel overwhelmed in writing your first book, is to aim small but powerful. It doesn't have to be your one and only book. Get one under your belt and then make your next one more ambitious. Also, I'd say start with the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit in your life. So write about what you know. You don't need to do tons of research or even any research if the book doesn't call for it. I like to follow the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Just use what's in your head and from your experience. Tip number 9 is to avoid Christianese. You know what I mean. Christianese is that secret lingo we use when we're with the family or when we want to sound more spiritual than we really are. Okay? Here are some examples of Christianese. Quiet time. A hedge of protection. Washed by the blood. Speaking into that. Backslidden. Ask Jesus into your heart. Okay, we don't think like that, huh? But remember, the New Testament was written in Koine Greek, not classical Greek. Koine was the daily language of the people. It's the street language. They didn't speak in King James reverence. So just talk normally and use universal vocabulary that we know. If you knew Greek, you'd see some of the words Paul uses are pretty slang and even offensive to some modern Christian sensibilities. So I write with a lot of the same language and slang words I use in daily life, like stinkin', crap, jackass, etc., things like that. Now, for my purposes, I'm trying to reach unbelievers with my book. So I try to talk like everyday talk. But, obviously such would not work well in a Bible study. But just speak normally. One final point on this. It's something I've grown out of, I think, hopefully with maturity, and something I've alluded to already. But it drives me crazy when I see it now. Don't try to sound overly spiritual or godly. I mean, unless you are, okay, then that's fine. My point again is just to be you, be real and be honest. My final tip for aspiring Christian authors is this. Tip number 10, avoid the magic Jesus. Avoid writing about God and Jesus as though they are magic genies that solves all problems, gives all comfort, meets all needs. I know that by just saying that can horrify some Christians. But as much as I pleaded with God for a redemption story that would bring him glory, my ex still divorced me. I lost my family and my life fell apart. My new wife, the good one, still has incurable cancer. Even the Apostle Paul pleaded with God to remove that thorn in the flesh, and God did not. Again, we are aiming for realness and honesty in our writing. So we use the magic Jesus and magic God when everything is Jesus, 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 and God, God, God. You know, these are the magic words that the kids in Sunday school learn when they don't know the answer to something. Just yell out Jesus, right? If you do this too much in your writing, it will come off as fake and your readers will begin to distrust you. So obviously God and Christ are the answers to all of our problems and the source of all reality. So I'm not saying we don't talk about God, just be careful how. One of my heroes of the faith is the late Francis Schaeffer. He pointed out that one of the most meaningless words in the human language is the word God. As you know, many people in our culture mean many different things when they talk about God. The same it goes for Jesus. The words are meaningless until you put the right content into them, which comes from the Bible. So what I recommend is to make sure you present God and Christ as the answers to life's problems, if that's what your book calls for. But make sure you define, explain, and give examples. How does Jesus transform you, and how is that related to the gospel? Remember that whole gospel thing? The incarnation, life, death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. So yes, believing in the true and living God makes all the difference in the world, but how and why? In my book, Epic Hope, I make big deals about God's transcendence and about his immanence when it comes to finding true hope. And I show how and why those attributes make it so. I connect the dots for the reader. Well, that's it for my top 10 tips for Christian writers. Now, I have a few more thoughts I want to leave with you. Over the last 20 years, I've read probably hundreds of books. I try to make it a personal goal to always finish the books I start, but there's many books that I just can't. Somewhere in the middle, I just can't go on. I try over and over, and the book dies there. You probably know what I'm talking about. Why do you think that is? Why are some books page turners, or at least finishable, while others die in the middle? And here it is. In most cases, it's because the author is serving me nothing but mashed potatoes. The whole book is unflavored mashed potatoes, and that gets old pretty quick. So then what makes a great book? It's easy. A full plate of variety, of spices, of delight, of unexpected blessings. A great book helps me in some way that I need. Now, your job is to make the best meal you've ever made for your guests. And remember, you are not cooking for you. You are cooking or writing for your guests. Write for them and you will succeed. And that's a freebie. That's number 11. Now, if all this up to this point has got you revved up to start writing, then I'm stoked, okay? I did my job. And I want to share with you really quick about how I can help you or help your journey be faster, easier, and more successful to getting that book done. It's my course, Newbie Book Writer. I like to think of it as the ultimate online course for aspiring authors. We work from your initial idea all the way to publication and beyond, from A to Z. It's the very course I wish I had when I started the perilous journey of my first book. Now remember, that little book took me 2 years to write and publish because I had to learn everything on my own. Newbie Book Writer it'll literally save you hundreds of hours of time. When I started writing that first book, I did see some other book writing courses and coaching programs, but I couldn't believe how expensive they were. I'm talking well over $1,000 just for the online video portions or classes. And if you wanted personal coaching to go with it, you're looking at like $2,000. They were outside my budget. Again, that's why I've created and priced Newbie Book Writer as the exact course I wish I had at the time. With my course, I cut out all the fluff and I teach you exactly what you need each step of the way. We follow a plan that I created that I call the powder plan. I know it's a bit corny, but it works. Powder stands for plan it, outline it, write it, design it, edit it, and release it. So are you a little foggy on your topic on how to get started or how to stay motivated? We cover all that in the plan it phase. Are you, say, freaked out about outlining an entire book? Not a problem. We break it down into bite-sized, tasty morsels on the outline phase. Are you worried that your writing skills are rusty or not up to par? I got you covered there too, okay? I share with you how professional authors write, what to do, what not to do, and a lot more in there. Are you wondering where on earth to find beta readers, editors, cover designers? The design it and edit it phase go into great detail about how to navigate those waters. And then, are you bewildered about how you will publish and launch your book out into the world to make a big splash? I've been there, and I've done it a number of times, and I will show you how. I'll show you how I was able to launch my books and reach #1 bestseller in multiple categories on Amazon and elsewhere. So we'll work at your pace. Once you sign up, you get lifetime access to the course material. And if you do coaching also, it doesn't expire, okay? I will motivate you and I'll help you stay accountable, but I'll do so with grace. We will set goals and I'll help you stay on track. I want to say a final word about being Christians together if you decide to work with me. If you decide you want to work with me, I want you to know that I don't expect our theology or our views to align at all points. As the saying goes, in essentials unity, in non-essentials liberty, in all things charity. Is Jesus going to rapture the church soon and then a 7-year tribulation will begin? Or is that a past event and we're now in the millennium? Can women be pastors, or should we baptize infants or just confessing adults? For my purposes in helping people write a compelling Christian book, I don't care. If you're one of my students, I won't debate you on non-essentials. That's not my job. It's not the point. But we may have issue if you are writing and defending blatant heresy like Mormon theology. Okay, just saying. Okay, so how does it work? How do you get started? How does it work? Well, I offer 3 options. You can take the online course by itself, and that includes 30 no-fluff video lessons. There's 6 modules. You get access to all future newbie book writer content, totally free. You get direct email access to me. You get the newbie book writer ebook that I wrote. It's a 27-page ebook. You get a 30-day money-back guarantee and lifetime membership forever. You get all of that for a one-time payment of $298. That's it. Most courses I see online are for $1,000 or more. So remember, I created the exact course I wish I had, and that includes the price tag with it. Now, the second option that I offer, it takes a leap farther by adding personal one-on-one coaching with me. So along with all the goodies I just mentioned before, you will also get 6 30-minute coaching calls with me. We can do it by phone or by Zoom. It's totally up to you. You can schedule those calls for whenever you want. I chose 6 because the course plan, the whole course, has 6 phases. Remember the whole powder plan thing? But it's totally up to you how you want to do it. And if it happens to take you 2 years to write your book, that's fine, right? Because life happens. But we'll work together to we'll try to make that happen faster. Now, the total price for option 2 with the coaching is $798. You can pay that all at once, and I do offer an option of a payment plan to break it in half, so it's $399 each. Now, the third option is the full arsenal for those deadly serious about becoming a published author. This option includes all the goodies before: the online video course, email access to me at any time, the book, lifetime membership, the 6 coaching sessions with me, the one-on-one time, but you also get direct access to my team. So what does that include? So first, you get my top beta reader to read your manuscript and offer careful but helpful feedback. Helping you fine-tune your manuscript will be his top priority. This is the guy that helped me cut 13,000 unnecessary words out of one of my books. Okay, so this man is a gifted writer and an expert in the Bible. So he will be your beta reader. Second, you will get to work one-on-one with my copy editor, who, by the way, has worked as a professional editor for over 30 years and worked for all the major Christian book publishers like Zondervan, Baker, and Harvest House. you ever heard of that little book called Boundaries? It's actually a series of books. Yeah, she was one of the editors on that project. She's also a master at communication and at teaching the Bible. I call her my word ninja. She will take your rough manuscript and polish it into a professional work, all while keeping your original voice. It's like magic, okay? Third, you will get to work one-on-one with my amazing cover designer who makes his living designing Christian book covers, just for Christians, okay? He can take a rough and the raw cover idea that you have in your head and turn it into something that will blow your mind. And it'll help you sell more of your book. The two areas in book creation that you don't want to skimp on is your editor and your cover designer. Please don't try to design your own book cover or have your Uncle Jimmy do it. He may be good in Photoshop and all, but book cover design is its own special niche. The way I see it is that these are one-time investments that will then pay me for life. And that's everything you need right there. You won't have to go out and find these people, no negotiating prices with them. You won't have to worry if they're, really qualified to do whatever it is, edit your book. Before I tell you my price for all this, what would the market value of all this be right now? How much do you think all that would cost out there? Well, as I said, most full-fledged book writing courses like mine sell for around $1,200. I don't know if you've priced coaching programs lately, but it's like the hot thing right now, and people are charging between, anywhere from $1,000 up to $10,000. From what I'm offering you in my coaching, the amount of time I'm offering, I could easily charge $1,500. Maybe someday I will, but I'm cool with where we're at right now. But let's say $1,200, okay? Now, a professional beta reader at the level I'm offering would be $400 easy. A professional editor these days is somewhere between 3 to 5 cents per word. So a regular size book would range between $1,000 to $1,500 to edit it. And a professional cover designer, not some online template factory, ranges between $800 to $1,200. Now, if we add all that up, the full course, the coaching, the beta reader, the complete manuscript editing, and a complete cover for both paperback and ebook, if you were to go out and pay for all of that today, you're looking somewhere between $4,500 to $5,000 for that. I'm offering my third option here, all that I just said to you, for $2,398. That's half the price you would normally pay for all these professionals on the market today. And my team will be ready for you whenever you're ready. Now, I know some of you are like my good friend Ed. Ed is a professional writer. He's a theologian. He has 2 master's degrees. He decided to write a book and do it all on his own, including editing and his cover design. Well, he did this all back in 2015, okay? He called me, 4 or 5 months ago, lamenting about how bad it all turned out, and he was asking me how my books look so good. He said, dude, your books look so good they could stand up next to any book in any bookstore. So don't be an Ed to try to save a few bucks. But I know that $2,398 is a lot of money, so I also offer the option to do it in 4 payments of $599. That's it, friends. Writing and publishing books is the main way I seek to fulfill the Great Commission. I don't preach from the streets or from a pulpit anymore, but I can still preach from my books. And this time I can reach people around the world, and you can do the exact same thing. You can totally do this if you just work it step by step. So I encourage you, if you want to write and publish your first book, check out the 3 plans I've laid out, find the right one for you, and then say, today is the day. All right. You know the difference between you and a published author. You are still saying, I will do it tomorrow. That is the mark of the procrastinator. Okay. The person who wrote and published a book was that same person, but at some point they said, today is the day. And they made a commitment to take it all the way to the end. And if you want, I will help you do that. All right? Thanks.